It's so dumb. I was talking and I didn't have the microphone turned on, so I have to start this video again. So, hey, it's the week of Halloween, so I thought I would debut my latest fashion accessory. This dope ass hat by Ever Crumbly and Witch. Hello. I had seen their work in Salem last year, and I was like, oh my god, these are amazing. And I felt like, these are handmade, they're not super cheap. And I was like, that's, it's a little extravagant. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's handmade. But this year, retail therapy is replacing any kind of going to Salem for Halloween whatever kind of moment. So, and I think it's pretty fucking rad. TBH. I should take it off. I love like the crooked, sort of like crumpled cone, and it's like this beautiful like feather. I mean, like, come on. So yes, hello hats. So I don't know, a friend of mine said maybe I should make hats my like 2021 thing, but anyway, that's not the point of this video. The point of the video is so when I put out like a thing like what should I make videos about, someone said, well, would you talk about your tarot journey? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I've ever done that. I talk a little bit about it in the old Tarot Unearthed bookie poo, and but I don't know that I've ever done it on this channel, so I just stop looking at myself and admiring my hat. What I really should do is hide QuickTime so that I can't vainly look at myself. All right. So I thought it would be interesting to maybe share with you, if you're new to my channel or whatever, or if you've never heard me talk about sort of my journey. I thought I would just tell that story, and I'm always curious to hear folks' origin stories. So, if you want to make a VR to this, or if you want to talk about it in comments, as always with comments, I read them all. I don't always have time to respond to them all because life is crazy. But I always really appreciate when folks engage. And if you ask a question, I try to reply to it. I tend to prioritize those. So I, like most, like, well, not like most, like many readers I know, I actually came to tarot sort of after a childhood of being terrified of anything that, smacked of fortune telling, of course, because I grew up Catholic, and that's a no-no, and in adulthood, I kind of have learned that, I think the reason why anything related to divination is a no-no in organized religion is because why do you need religion if you can just talk to God directly? If you can just get the answers you want without a middleman. So that to me is part of my journey. I guess I'll get there. So yeah, I mean, I didn't have any relationship to it when I was a kid. I remember my mother telling me a story about getting a reading when she was young, and the reader predicting her father's death, which probably really terrifying, I think. So, my family to this day, my parents anyway, are not super fans of tarot, and that I do it. But I was ironically in a production of Godspell when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and a couple folks in the production had decks, and I had never seen one in person before. And I sort of was like, oh, those are cool. Like that, what? It was sort of like, like, I don't know, what's this thing? So I went to the local like discount dollar bookshop. We used to have those back then, and they had like a little new agey section, and then there was this book on tarot, which I've showed you before. It was the Tarot Workbook by Emily Peach, and it didn't have any pictures of the. I mean, it had a couple pictures, but it was basically just like each card, and then a space where you would like put your own card. So there was no pictures of the whole deck. So it was like, oh, maybe I need to like get a deck. So I mean, this was like 1998, 1999 ish. So I mean, I don't think I knew that there was this whole subculture, but there was definitely the internet at that point, and I sort of fell upon the American Tarot Association, which at the time was, I feel like maybe far more active than it is now. I think I'm still a member, honestly, although I haven't seen a newsletter in a while, so maybe I let it lapse by mistake. But anyway, I found the American Tarot Association pretty quickly, and I found Joan Bunning's website, and there like a couple blogs that were like really mostly like deck reviews, and I was like, well, I don't know, what's the tarot deck like. So I I tried to find, I've always been like big on trying to find like the authentic thing, or like the real deal. But I didn't really know what I was looking for, so I just sort of looked around, and like there was all these things about, the Rider Waite Smith. No one was reading Marseille back then that I knew of. And generally, it was like those decks they're not for reading, they're for game playing. And anyway, I went on Amazon, which was like just starting to be a behemoth, and I bought the original Rider Waite Tarot pack because it said it was the original, and I got it, and I was just like, this is just study, like this is just curiosity. And I remember laying on my bed, in my parents' apartment, looking through the cards for the first time, and I was like, oh my god, these are like, I just remember the visceral reaction I had looking at each card for the first time. And I remember like the Empress. I remember like falling in love with the Empress. The Pamela Coleman Smith's Empress is still to this day one of my favorites. I remember seeing Death for the first time and the Devil, and like just this very visceral reaction to all the cards. And I think I fell in love at that moment. And so I didn't find the book that I got super useful for me at that point. It's, I've talked about it since and I ended up losing it and then getting another copy because I wanted to sort of see, 20 years on what I wasn't getting. And it's very Golden Dawn. It's very, esoteric. It's all the astrological associations, all the esoteric titles. It was too much for me, but I ended up finding a book, ironically, which is, it's called the Everything Tarot book. And it was, in the Everything series, kind of like the Dummies series, like Tarot for Dummies. But it was called, and I didn't know that this was part of a larger series. And the book was actually really poorly edited. There were like chapters that got cut off and like, whatnot. But the book itself was actually pretty good. But it did start me on my path of tarot consumerism because, in the book, the author talked about how, you have to have a cloth, to wrap the deck in and a box to put it in, and then you need a cloth to read on. And, there was all this sort of like, have one deck for yourself, have one for reading for others. So that kind of set me down the path of like spend on tarot goodies. And I did a lot. I remember, I wish I could still find them. I know they're probably long gone. I had actually from Salem, there was a shop in Salem that sold these tarot wrap. It was just a piece of really beautiful silk, and I bought a couple of those. And then I've shown it before, but I don't know where it is right now. I wonder where it is. I have like a wooden box that I ordered online that has the Hermit on it, that was like wood burned and stained. And then I started buying decks because then I quickly discovered that there was more to life than the Rider Waite Smith deck, and I didn't like the Christian imagery in it. Like I was 18 or 19. I was like not. I was trying to like recover from, what being a gay Catholic had done to my brain. But I was like all in at that point. I I quickly found the Rachel Pollack book 78 Degrees of Wisdom. That was definitely a formative book. It was kind of the first book that really kind of opened me up. And I remember getting like a spiral notebook, like a steno notebook, and just like making like lists of the card meanings and like really studying them and like doing it very like studying by rote. And I did a reading for a coworker, and I was really just sort of I had the book in one hand and the deck in the other, as I think we all do. And she was like, she looked at me. She's like, "How the fuck did you know that?" And I was like, "What?" I didn't, and I was like, it wasn't a reading in the sense that I was really just kind of pulling cards and reading from the book, but like still there was like this thing of, oh shit, like that, you just talked about a bunch of stuff I've never told you. And I was like, oh, um that's cool. And then, like all newbies, like all students, I quickly decided that I was an expert, or wanted to be. I was like, I want to be Rachel Pollack when I grow up. I want to write a tarot book. And luckily I had the shyness or the lack of ambition to stop me from like presenting myself as an expert, and embarrassing myself. But there is an interesting thing, I think, when you knew about something, you really want to tell the world about it. You want to evangelize about this new thing, and so um, but in so doing, you forget that you've just learned it, and there are other people out there who have been doing it longer and doing it well. So, I mean, from there, I just kept doing readings and studying. And at some point, I found, I had found the American Tarot Association. I knew that they had the free reading networks. And at some point, I kind of bit the bullet, and I joined and I started doing readings there. And that was probably, the most helpful learning experience that I could have had at that point, because you do get a mentor, so you got occasional feedback. And I just read every chance I could. I just read, to the point where I actually got a little burned out and I ended up taking a break, which I've done several times, in various parts of my tarot life. I don't, I know young readers who are sort of new and very good. I don't think I was new and very good. I think I had a knack for it. I think I was inclined toward it, but I don't think I think I was fighting with what I thought tarot was. Because I was still anxious about the idea of fortune telling. I was still kind of remembering the story of my mother. Like, I didn't want to predict my or anyone else's death. I didn't want to, like, and at the time, luckily, I think if without this, I might not have continued on. But there was a big push in the ATA to really make it about tarot not being about fortune telling. It wasn't about fortune telling. It was about self improvement, psychology. I think to a degree, ceremonial magic. Although that was not, there's always an element of that in there, because of course that's where the modern tarot kind of came from. The Rider-Waite-Smith is all about the Golden Dawn. And so, but I like, so part of me was like, yeah, no, I would like spill that anywhere I went. Like, oh, it's not about fortune telling. Like, it's about psychology and personal development. Um, but I and everyone else was sort of making predictions. Um, so I couldn't quite reconcile what tarot was for. Like, if it wasn't for predictions, but we were making predictions, but they weren't predictions, they were forecast. Like, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And so I was struggling with what the point of tarot was. I justified it, and I think that this was helpful too. It helped me, certainly. I said, this is a thing that can help people become less passive in their lives. And I certainly, because I think of my religion, had become really passive and felt more like a witness to life than a participant in it. So in that way, I found it helpful. But I just, and I was young. I was 19, 20 years old. I hadn't, I thought I knew it all. I thought I had life figured out, but you don't. I didn't. And so, it took it. I did kind of okay readings for a while. I I would write these long, long, long written readings for the tarot networks, like like 3 single-space pages, and really tell the client everything I thought about the card, everything I thought about tarot, and everything I thought about their question. And one of the mentors said, people don't want that. They just want an answer. And I was like, no, they want to know how brilliant I am. And so I think one of the mistakes that I made that I didn't see until I got older, and had more life experience, was that people do just want an answer. The tarot reading can't be about me and my ego and showing off. It has to be about answering the question. And I think the other thing, that I internalized back then was, the thing of rephrasing questions, which was absolutely required really on the network and was really super popular back then. And the whole thing was that, we and the whole thing was, so the ATA was all about like making tarot reading ethical, which I am here for and I fully support. And a lot of that had to do with the kinds of questions you would and wouldn't answer. And I think in many ways, a lot of what we know today came from that movement. So we won't do health readings. We won't do third-party readings. We won't do money or legal readings. All those kinds of ethical or whatever kinds of things that we talk about today. I think started there, kind of definitely years before I joined the ATA, but I think they all kind of formed as a result of that dialogue back, I would say probably the early 90s, it would have been when this was happening. But so rephrasing the question was a way of protecting you and the client from doing an unethical reading. And so, you might come to me and say, well, will my boyfriend come back? And I would say, that I can't read about someone who hasn't requested a reading. And tarot really isn't about fortune telling. So I'm going to ask, what does Jenny need to know about her relationship? And so, we did that kind of religiously. And, I went along doing that, and I just at some point found it kind of unsatisfying. And I had been reading and reading and reading, and, this was like 5, 6, 7 years in. I was in my late 20s by this point. And I kind of gave it up. Like, I just said, I don't get this. I don't get what this is for. I'd started to grow kind of embarrassed by it. Like, I suddenly kind of didn't want people to know that I had this. I put all my decks away. The books just sort of hung on the shelf. And I remember someone saying, you have a lot of tarot books. I'm like, oh, I just have a lot of books. And then a year or two went by. And then I started seeing tarot kind of everywhere. I would see like a YouTuber who was doing ASMR videos, and they would pretend to be a tarot reader, or that sort of thing. And then suddenly it was everywhere, and I just, in a weird way, kind of felt it calling me back. But I was like, I don't know that I want to do it again, because I didn't find it really helpful after a while. But as I kind of allowed it to return, I started to kind of reckon with the things that were bothering me. One of which was that I just didn't find it really helpful, and I didn't understand sort of what the point was. And another thing was happening concurrent with that, which is like other kinds of fortune telling tools were suddenly becoming really big. Lenormand was really heating up at that point. I think Mary Kay Greer's blog kind of like kicked that into high gear. In the mid 90s, A Wicked Pack of Cards came out, the sort of tarot history book, and there's a whole chapter on Lenormand, both the deck and the actual human. And I sort of wonder if maybe that was the beginning of it, like people started to rediscover it. But what was interesting, because Lenormand was sort of becoming popularized again, or at least in the United States, where nobody was talking about it when I started reading tarot. you occasionally heard about, reading playing cards, which people have always done. What Lenormand did, I think, was unlock for people a lot of the restrictions that they felt about reading cards, because Lenormand is kind of designed for fortune telling. It's kind of designed to read about people who aren't in the who the reading is for. It's designed for third party readings. There are cards dedicated to other people, and people started finding in Lenormand things that they were feeling restricted in with tarot, and I remember starting to actually get really defensive of tarot, because people were like, well, in tarot it's all mushy and like messy, and it's all about like the cerebral psychology, and you can really like dive deep. Lenormand is like, it gives you answers. And I thought that's not really true. Tarot does what we've made it do. It wasn't designed to do any of this. It was designed as a game. And that I think gave me a mission, because I tried reading. I've talked about this many times on the channel. I've tried reading Lenormand. I just don't enjoy it. I do read Sibylla. I've played with Kipper. Both of those I like a lot more. And Lenormand just for some reason doesn't sing to me. But it did kind of put me on this mission of saying, well, tarot does what we ask it to do. It's not inherently mushy. It's that we allow it to be. It's not inherently cerebral. It's that we ask it to be. It's not inherently psychological. It's that that's what we have asked of it and associated it with for all these years. And so that was kind of act 2 of my journey, and really that was really what sort of got me starting this channel, was trying to get out of tarot what I wanted out of it, which was a little bit more practicality, and was a little bit more tea spilling and more gossipy and more, I don't know, less esoteric, less spiritual, less mired in the Golden Dawn, and more about kind of good old fashioned fortune telling, which shows, in a way, how much I had changed in the couple of years I took away, because all of that fear of fortune telling, all of that embarrassment about tarot kind of went away, and I was like, no, this is what people like. This is what people want. Look, if they didn't want this, then Lenormand wouldn't be blowing up right now. But tarot can do that too. It is no more or less a fortune-telling tool or a gossipy little friend than it is a spiritual tool. The tool isn't the point. The user is the point. How the user uses the tool is the point, And I have noticed when reading Sibylla that it does have a little bit more of like a Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost kind of warning quality to it. But I get the same answers ultimately. It's just the tone that Sibylla does versus tarot. So then it became my mission to kind of declutter tarot and demystify it and de-Golden Dawnify it. To be honest, because I felt like actually that was getting in the way of everything that I needed. And really the whole point of this channel, and as you've watched the evolution of this channel, I've just been sharing with you what I had learned about making tarot down, bringing it down to earth. And then ultimately that culminated in Tarot on Earth, the book I self-published, because I wanted to sort of share this good news, this new evangelism of like tarot for down and dirty readings. And ultimately, I think you can have both. You know what I mean? I think you can have it both ways. You can use tarot for spiritual development and psychology and all that, and you can use it to find out if he's cheating on you. I think all of that is valid. I think most of us spend our days thinking about what to have for dinner. Why did this person say that to me? Why did so-and-so act that way? Why am I confused about this? Why am I suddenly attracted to this person? And those are the kinds of questions I think, we're often more concerned with than, ascending the tree of life, which is also valid, but it's a very particular path and a very particular thing. And, I think you can do both. So that's where I am today, actually, is still kind of continuing on that path. And from there, it's really been about how do I make my readings as specific as possible? How do I make them as precise as possible? And the other thing is I don't rephrase questions anymore. I came to a point where I realized that was not only not helpful, but it also kind of felt arrogant. For me to say to a client, whether they're paying or not, hey, your question is unethical, let me rephrase it. Like, that to me is rude. I don't know more about what someone needs, what you as a client or querent needs than you do. Most people are perfectly capable of asking the question that they want to ask. And if they don't, usually they'll say, hey, I want a reading. It's about this, but like, can you help me? Or is this question good? And in that case, I'm always happy to work with folks. But for the most part, people know what they want to ask. I had a situation recently where someone reached out and said, hey, I know a lot of people don't do health readings. Do you do them? And I'm like, well, it depends on the situation. And they said, essentially their doctor was recommending a new medication and they wanted a reading about how it would go. And I said, you know what? That's a great question. I actually don't feel comfortable answering that because I'm not a pharmacist or pharmacologist. So, I think your best bet really is to talk with the pharmacist. But I didn't offer to do a different reading for them because they knew what they wanted to know. They want to know if the medication's going to work. I think that's a valid question. And actually, I think it's a pretty appropriate one for prediction in a sense because the chemistry of the person and the drug are set, you know what I mean? So the reaction is probably going to go the way it goes because of the two interact, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of a predictable outcome. The thing is that it's a question for a pharmacist. The thing that I have to do as a reader is make sure that person doesn't feel like shit that I turned them down. And I appreciated that they said, are you comfortable with this? And I said, I'm actually not, and here's why, but thank you for asking me. But I won't ever rephrase a question unless someone really, really wants help getting it right. And that I'm happy to do. But I absolutely believe that if you come for a reading, you know what you want to know about. So unless people ask me. So that's kind of how I've evolved as a reader, and that's kind of my journey. And I don't, who knows where the next phase is. I think certainly workshops and more books are in the future. And really the new book that I'm trying to figure out where it's going to live is really a workbook designed to, again, help you kind of get that path. It takes what I've learned in the last few years towards getting more specific, getting more grounded, and helps you become just a more precise reader, which is kind of my mission now, is to help people get really precise answers that actually answer the question and that are satisfying. So that's what a lot of my videos have been about in the last couple of years, and that's what this new book is about. So hoping to have more information about the book at some point soon. It will be out in the world, whether it is self-published or published by a mainstem publisher, but that takes time. So yeah, this was just a walk through my journey basically as a reader and kind of where I've been and where I'm going and all that jazz. One thing we've learned from 2020 is you never know, which is an interesting thing for a tarot reader. I did in the book actually, and when it comes out you'll get to read this, talk a bit about how in a weird way the pandemic was totally predictable because all of the not the ingredients, but all of the events were leading toward it. And but there's it's a very hard thing to predict something that big, to have seen it. So anyway, that is that. I hope you're well. I hope you're having a good week, and we'll talk soon. Bye.